Welcome to Accounting Life with Jotham Ty, a space where we'll talk about anything and everything surrounding the people that grind through your month-end accounting close.
Hi, everyone. Today's episode is Tales from the Corporate Tax Fairy with Lorraine McIntire. Our guest today is Lorraine McIntire, Vice President of Tax at Camping World. On this episode, we talk about what it's like to work in the world of corporate tax, why this work can be so fulfilling, and we share some real stories of what corporate tax is like in the workplace. Now I'll hand it over to our host, Gapify CEO, Jotham Ty.
Hey, Lorraine, great to see you again. Thanks for joining us on today's episode.
My pleasure. It's always a pleasure to see your face, Jotham. I really miss working with you.
I do as well. And we've known each other for a while, but just for our audience to know, I enjoyed working with Lorraine, not only because is she an expert in corporate tax accounting, so you've been in the field for 30 years, you're currently the VP of Tax at Camping World, but what makes, I think, this conversation very exciting is how excited you are about your field and your area. So I really want to dig into, what's driving that fun and enjoyment in tax. And, obviously, tax is not known as the most exciting thing in the world, but you've, established and you've made a really great career in the profession and are having a great time doing it. So I really want to ask you first, Lorraine, what's the secret sauce? Why is it so fun for you?
Thank you for that lead in, Jotham. I have just had the time of my life the past 32 years being in this field. I started this field unexpectedly. I'll go back and tell you, in college, I took an elective class. I was an econ major, actually, but I was a waitress also. And our restaurant had been audited for the 1986 tip law. And so the manager came to me because I was the only one working there that was in college. And he said, "Can you help us figure this out? We don't really know what we have to do. And we know that you're taking business classes. And could you help us figure this out?" And I said, "Okay, sure." So I went back to school and I looked at the criteria, the curriculum that was ready to register. And I saw this one class, individual taxation. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to sign up for that class. And on day one of the class, our instructor, his name was Jack Robinson, he walked in dressed as a fictional character named Laszlo Spotcheck. And he had on, plaid pants and a striped shirt. And he had his belt all the way up to his chest and his high water pants. And he came carrying a shoebox. And on the shoebox, he had it labeled taxes. And we spent the whole quarter preparing a tax return out of receipts that we pulled from the shoebox. And it was quite an experience, and I got hooked on tax. And I ended up taking every elective that I could take that related to tax. And when I graduated from college, I was recruited to join the office of Coopers and Lybrand, and that's where I started my career.
Wow. So I love how it kind of originated from just a moment early in college, really, and it just propelled you into that direction. So it doesn't sound like, Lorraine, that you read FAS 109 back then or ASC 740 and oh my gosh, the details of this are so fun. I'm going to enjoy everything. But it sounds like you really had a very tangible moment early on, and that's what led you to that path.
It's what showed me that tax could be fun. So that circles back to, why do I enjoy doing it? What makes it so fun? I would have to say early on, it's my introduction to tax through Laszlo Spotcheck that kind of made it fun for me. And I've treated it as something fun ever since.
That is so awesome. And, just to find more fun within your area and tax, I'd love to, maybe double click into, your job today. What parts of tax do you still find fun? Is it getting into the technical details of FIN 48 or ASC 740? Is it managing deferred tax schedules? Is it collaborating with different business partners? What would you say are the most enjoyable parts of your job today?
So when I left public accounting after 10 years, I came more into a management role, more of a administrative role, where I was a project manager, and I was able to work very closely with business partners at solving problems. And using my knowledge in tax, I was able to find solutions and give options such that the business could choose. Instead of having just one option for the right answer, I was able to creatively find and legally find alternative answers. And then the business was able to make that selection to choose what worked best for them. So I think the funnest part, or why it continues to be fun for me, is that I was able to approach it more from a business angle. And early on, I had to learn to report to non-tax people. Once I left public accounting, I left a lot of the technical research behind me and started dealing more with project management, and then working with technical people like yourself and others in the field to kind of give me the best answers to choose from. And so when you're in industry and you have a position like I do, which I'm VP of tax at Camping World, and I've always held head of tax positions since I left public accounting. There were only 2 short stints where I wasn't the number one tax person in the company. You have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. You don't have time to dive into a lot of technical research. You have to skim everything. And that's every news article you get every day, whether it's you subscribe to 4 or 5 different services, you're skimming the headlines and something catches your eye. Then you drill down into it. You kind of get the feel for what they're trying to accomplish. And then you call your technical resource person and you ask them to help fit that model into your business. And
so it really sounds like there's a really tangible consultative requirement when it comes to tax. And I've seen this before, and I want to ask you also, but from my vantage point, what I have seen in my years on from a controllership purview is as businesses make big decisions about which new geographies to set up entities in, like there is heavy consultation with tax leaders like yourself to make sure that it's maximized economically to be favorable to the business. And it seems like you're always like attached to or involved with really key business decisions. Is that like a fair assessment of like the role? And that's what I'm seeing from my end.
You nailed it. I mean, you nailed it on the head. I mean, being in this role is being a consultant to the business, having a seat at the table. I wouldn't be invited to come back to the table if I wasn't flexible in my thinking. And I tell this story over and over again to my staff, to anybody that's venturing into this career. You can use tax as a weapon or a tool. And a lot of times consulting firms will use it as a weapon. They'll say, you can't do that because there's a tax cost. Well, turn that around. And how can you use that knowledge as a tool? How can you say instead, here are 3 different ways we could view it, and here are your choices. What is your tolerance for risk? And so when I approach any problem and I come back to the business, I always come back with choices A, B, and C. And I measure the risk of all of them. If you want to be 0 risk, it's going to be the hardest implementation, right? Because you're going to be doing things that the business doesn't want to do, and to make it 0 risk. But if they're willing to take risk and you have some flexibility, then maybe you'll find something that's tactical and practical. And that's another motto that I use besides tax as a weapon or a tool. It's tax is tactical and practical. Whatever I do to the business, I go to the table and I want something practical and something that we can accomplish in a tactical manner. That's what keeps me inviting. That's what keeps my invitations coming to the table, because I do that.
Lorraine, when you put it that way and you talk about tax as a weapon or taking a risk assessment approach, it really sounds very strategic, right? So when people maybe earlier in their careers, and I would put myself in this bucket, when I first look at what people do in tax, my first incorrect assumption is that it's just taking transactions and then applying tax code to figure out your tax liability and so on. But there is a very strategic approach that you just described, assessing risk for the business and being able to identify the different options to enable different opportunities in the business. And it's just like a really different way now that you've described it of, appreciating tax. And now I can understand why you are the tax fairy and you're always so happy to talk tax with me.
Yeah, and you nailed it again, Jotham. What makes me so happy about the job I do is that I have bosses that let me do my job. And I have a business partners that keep inviting me back to the table because they like the partnership. They like my partnership with them because I'm able to give them a green light or a yellow light, but I just don't give red lights. And a lot of times when you're working with an advisor on the outside and they're not at the table, they don't understand the business. All you get is red lights, and business will come to me and say, tax says I can't do it this way.
Right.
Or, that it's going to be tax issues if I do it this way. And I say, well, let's dissect that. Let's figure out how we can, throw a bridge across those issues and what is the shortest, easiest, best answer. Again, let's be practical, but we also have to be tactical. And so that's why I love my job, primarily because I have bosses that believe in me and they support me, and it makes it a lot of fun.
Well, your expertise and mastery of tax code, I know from my experience working with you, you made it very easy for anyone to go to see with any kind of questions that would have relevant impact. Clicking back a few steps, Lorraine, you mentioned business partners and collaboration. So for those that may be interested in a career in tax accounting, like who are those types of, what type of departments are you working with and who are you partnering most? Is it legal? Is it, the C-level, or is it a little bit of everyone?
It's a little bit of everyone. So I've always usually reported to the CFO's office. And so we're dealing with SEC reporting, we're dealing with accounting, we're dealing with valuation, we're dealing with business development. And then a tertiary to that are all the service lines that we rely on as the business. So that would be legal, human resources, payroll, and it would be sales and marketing, inventory management. So those are the ones that I usually have these, kind of business consulting discussions with. But then I would say one of the biggest departments I partner with is the IT department.
Oh,
Because,
interesting.
yeah, a lot of changes that we're making, whether it's from SOX controls to, kind of implementing a Vertex overlay. We have a new product code. So I'll give you an example. At Camping World, we have a couple hundred legal entities. We have 12 to 14,000 employees, $6 billion of revenue, and we're almost in every state domestically. And so we haven't really had ventured into international at all. So it makes the challenge better contained, right? But let's say that they want to implement a new product code, a new product launch. We have to evaluate what the sales and use tax implications of that are, as well as what the nexus implications of that are with regards to income tax. There's also a payroll tax component because you may have field employees working because it may be a totally online solution that you're rolling out. And so you're starting very early on at identifying how IT needs to capture the bits of data that not only allows us to capture reporting segments, right, and deferred revenue waterfall schedules for the business, but also allows us to report on revenue that might be subject to sales tax. And if we have to turn it on in a Vertex solution or an Avalara solution, we need to map it by the SKU or product code or whatever identification the business is giving it. So these are all the things that start, and it usually starts with a call from our CFO who says, hey, we're thinking about rolling out a new product. And then I get busy, and I say, what's the product? Where are you going to sell it? How are you going to sell it? Is it which reporting unit is it going up to? What legal entity are we going to put it in? Where's the offices going to be? Where are the employees going to be? So once I gather all the data, then I call together my whole team, which consists of 5 people inside the company, and then about 12 people outside the company that we have weekly meetings with. And so I truly believe that our service provider is on my team. It doesn't matter that they're not an employee. I treat them the same way. And once we get that team together and we identify all the known items, then we get busy and we come up with 2 or 3 different solutions.
Wow. And I mean, those types of examples that you shared, I think again touches on, I think what we covered earlier, which is you're in every single major change a company goes through, right? So in this case, a new product where you have to determine the taxability application to, Avalara, Vertex, and so on. Obviously new geos you're involved with. So it looks like you really are a key strategic member of the change management, which is pretty cool. And not every department in accounting gets that level of exposure. And I remember working with you on an ERP implementation many years ago, and I consider myself, Lorraine, an international accounting expert. But when you had me set up shadow books and we talked about shadow entries, I'm like, man, this is so cool. I feel like a ninja with these shadow books. And the way your tone and your mood and just collaborating with you just made it so much fun. So I know we're supposed to talk about tax, but this is my moment to thank you and appreciate and express appreciation for our partnership, because it was a lot of fun back then.
Well, I recognize in you a very similar passion that I have in myself. And I think that's why we've kept in touch all these years and why we connected so much, is because your mind is open. You're open to explore and to experience, and you really truly want to serve. You want to deliver results, whether it's to your employer or to your client or to your employees. You first have to have that desire, number one, to be able to solve problems, to provide alternatives, and then let them solve the problem with the alternatives, right? But also to mentor your staff. And I think it's short-sighted. A lot of individuals that have the passion like you or me, we maybe don't get a chance to shine because maybe the person we report up to hasn't opened their mind to that yet. And I encourage everyone to have a heart-to-heart talk with who you report to. Ask them to open their mind, to allow you to come into that circle so that you can not only learn and grow, but that you could use your creative talents to kind of help process some angles that will help the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I've learned in my years that a lot of the onus, if you have a passion to explore, new areas of your trade, the onus, I think, is just as much on us to raise our hands to our direct reports and say, hey, I'm passionate about this. Like, how can I get some opportunities? But that's great advice, Lorraine, for whether the listeners here are thinking about tax careers or other types of paths. Having that open line of communication with the people that can help open up those opportunities is pretty important. Yeah. And you mentioned our passion. I think that's one thing that keeps us connected. I do have a tax story related to how that passion got me into trouble once. And I want to ask you for a story as well related to tax, but I want to share you, and actually I'm sharing a story, but I'm also admitting guilt here, Lorraine.
I hope it doesn't involve me.
No, it doesn't. This is before you joined the company that we were with, the person that was in charge of the tax provision left. I think this was either the first or second quarter after we went public. So that person left. It was a director of external reporting who managed our service provider, Altum Partners. They're amazing. But that person left, and guess who got stuck with reviewing the tax provision that quarter? My passion was, kind of like what you sensed in me. I was like, hey, sign me up for that. I'd love to learn. And boy, oh boy, Lorraine, that was super tough. I mean, the windfall of something, and a lot of those concepts just like zip through my head. Thankfully, Altum Partners was very patient about explaining everything to me. We ultimately got signed off, but my passion got me into trouble that quarter because I was like, hey, I'm ready to take it on. I know you need it in a week, but I got it. Little did I know, and this is why I have so much appreciation, Lorraine, for your role and what you do for an organization. There's a lot of technical stuff that is really dense and for even folks like me with a CPA background, really hard to to digest. So that is my tax story. I'd love to hear about any stories or nightmares that you have before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think, the nightmares are when the tax laws keep changing. I mean, I would have to say the biggest nightmare of my career, and it's ongoing, is tax provision or tax accounting, because GAAP rules are always changing their perspective of tax, and they change it, like you mentioned, windfalls. The windfalls and the shortfalls of the stock option compensation was eliminated, but we had to deal with it for 15 years, and it was a nightmare. We spent, collectively, firms spent billions of dollars in consulting fees trying to figure out what GAAP was trying to tell them to do for windfalls and shortfalls. So just as we get it done, GAAP says, hey, this is too complicated. FASB says, hey, it's too complicated. Nobody can understand it. We're going to eliminate it. And so that happens all the time. FASB's rules are always changing. That's my biggest nightmare, because it's really hard to understand tax code because it's not written in plain English. But then to understand FASB rules that are written to try to help non-tax people understand tax that nobody understands, it just becomes a convoluted mess. So I would say all of my nightmares in my 32 plus years of career have been related to tax provision, tax reporting, restatements, significant deficiencies, material weaknesses. Whenever that happens, whether it's in tax or not, there's a tax gets whipsawed. Whenever there's a restatement, tax gets whipsawed. And so, we tax professionals, it's a challenge. We look at that, though, as a alternative universe, because it's not real tax, and it only exists on your 10Qs and 10Ks. Nobody else in the whole wide world will ever remember what you put in your tax provision footnote. You may have a 10 paragraph footnote, and you could be spending 500 hours on it. It boils down to that footnote, and then you file, and then you do it all over again the next quarter. And so that's what makes it really hard. So my wish for the world would be if FASB would just go back to the old, I think it was called FAS 82 method of doing tax provision, or APB 11. I'm sorry, the old APB 11, which got it got replaced by FAS 109 back in, I want to say 1992, right around there. APB 11 was so easy because there were no deferred tax assets, no deferred tax liabilities. All you had to do was estimate your tax expense and the tax payable, and that was it.
Wow. Well, in an area that's already technical and again dense and in a lot of cases complex, just a moving target and moving standard, as you described, is probably very tough to deal with, and we don't have to deal with it as much on the GL and controllership side. I mean, we only get new major standards every so often. But tax gets a lot of attention, and a lot of, to your point, the material weaknesses that are reported, because there's a lot of sensitivity around the numbers that your team is producing, is where auditors may pick at things. And but I think, to me, Lorraine, that's why for those that are in accounting leadership roles, that's why we appreciate you guys, because we know that you are standing in those front lines with a very, very tough challenge each quarter. So, and for you specifically, Lorraine, to have so much joy and passion with what you do, I have always enjoyed working with you. I enjoy continuing to keep in touch with you, and you were truly the perfect guest for this podcast episode. And I thank you for joining us today. It's been a lot of fun.
Likewise, Jotham. It's always a pleasure to keep in touch with you. I'm so proud of what you've built since you left the company that we worked at together, to see your growth. And your achievements and your accreditation in the community. I mean, it's just really been awesome to know you too, and I hope that we continue our relationship for years to come. Although I will tell you, I'm retiring from the tax field next year.
Congratulations. Oh
And
my gosh, that's amazing.
I'm going to embark on my passion projects. I'm very involved with local politics. I'm very involved with nonprofits. I currently sit on 5 different boards. And so I am really looking forward to retiring my official VP hat and actually spending more time developing some results for the nonprofits that I service right now.
That is so exciting to hear. And I will definitely be keeping in touch with you as you go off on those new adventures. And in fact, we can probably do some future podcast episodes about those topics. I'm sure there's an accounting tie-in that we can.
That's right. Also from the road, because I'll be visiting you in my RV.
There you go. Well, I'm all the way New York now, so that's quite a bit of a.
That's on my list. It's on my bucket list.
Really?
Oh yeah, I'm going to go do your road trip. So definitely time to swing by New York.
I can't wait for that. And thank you again for joining us today, Lorraine. And
thank you, Joe.
We'll be in touch very soon.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you for stopping by. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you want more information, please check us out at gapify.com. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.